Rachel Martinez stood at the back of the crowded auction house, her hand instinctively resting on her swollen belly. At 6 months pregnant and recently divorced, she had come here with one purpose: to find affordable ranch hands for her inherited cattle ranch in Montana. The property had been left to her by her late grandfather, but it came with debts and responsibilities she never anticipated. Her ex-husband had taken half of everything in the divorce, leaving her with limited resources and a baby on the way. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the room as he called out lot numbers. Rachel had heard about these kinds of auctions before: desperate people selling their services for room, board, and minimal wages. It wasn't slavery, but it was close enough to make her uncomfortable. Still, she needed help, and her options were running thin. Next up, we have Marcus Thompson and his twin boys, Jake and Luke, age 12, the auctioneer announced. Rachel's attention snapped to the small platform where a man in his early 30s stood with two identical boys flanking him. Marcus leaned heavily on a wooden crutch, his left leg clearly damaged. His weathered face showed the kind of exhaustion that came from months of hardship. The boys stood quietly beside their father, their clothes clean but obviously worn. Rachel could see the resemblance immediately. All three had the same dark hair and determined jawline. What struck her most was how the twins stayed close to their father, not out of fear, but out of protective instinct. These weren't children who had been broken by their circumstances. Marcus is an experienced ranch hand with 15 years of cattle management, the auctioneer continued. Injured in a riding accident 6 months ago, but still capable of light work. The boys are strong for their age and quick learners. Starting bid is $500 for the 3-month contract. Rachel felt sick. A 3-month contract meant these people would essentially be indentured servants. She looked around the room at the other bidders, mostly rough-looking men who seemed more interested in cheap labor than human dignity. One particularly unpleasant man in a stained cowboy hat was eyeing the boys with an expression that made Rachel's maternal instincts flare. The bidding started slowly. 500, 600, 700. Rachel found herself raising her hand before she fully realized what she was doing. 800. The man in the cowboy hat countered with 900. Something about his predatory smile made Rachel's decision for her. 1,000, she called out, her voice carrying across the room. Several heads turned to look at her, a pregnant woman in a simple dress, clearly out of place among the rough crowd. The auctioneer looked surprised but nodded. 1,000 from the lady in the back. Do I hear 1,100? The room fell silent. Even the man in the cowboy hat seemed to reconsider, muttering something under his breath before shaking his head. Rachel held her breath, her heart pounding as she realized what she had just committed to. Sold to the lady for $1,000. the auctioneer announced with a sharp bang of his gavel. As the crowd began to disperse, Rachel made her way toward the platform where Marcus and his boys waited. Up close, she could see the mixture of hope and wariness in their eyes. Marcus straightened as much as his injured leg would allow, extending his hand to her. "Ma'am, I'm Marcus Thompson. These are my boys, Jake and Luke." His voice was steady, but Rachel could hear the underlying tension. "I want you to know that we'll work hard for you. We won't be any trouble." Rachel shook his hand, knotting the calluses that spoke of years of honest labor. "I'm Rachel Martinez. I own a cattle ranch about an hour north of here." She paused, looking at the three faces before her. "I have to be honest with you, I've never done anything like this before. I inherited the ranch from my grandfather, and I'm in over my head." Jake, the slightly taller of the twins, spoke up. "Our dad knows everything about cattle, ma'am. He taught us too. We can help with whatever you need." His brother Luke nodded eagerly. "We're real good workers. We helped Dad on the Peterson ranch before." He trailed off, glancing at his father uncertainly. Marcus's jaw tightened. Before Peterson decided he didn't want to pay for damaged goods. The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. 15 years of loyal service, and the moment I get hurt, he finds an excuse to let us go. Rachel felt her heart clench. She had heard enough stories about ranch owners who treated their workers poorly. "Well, you're working for me now, and I believe in treating people fairly." She looked at the boys. "Are you hungry? We can stop for dinner on the way to the ranch." The twins exchanged glances, and Rachel caught the subtle nod Marcus gave them. "Yes, ma'am," they said in unison. As they walked toward the exit, Rachel couldn't help but wonder what she had gotten herself into. She had come here looking for employees and somehow ended up with what felt like a ready-made family. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was about to become a single mother, and now she had 3 more people depending on her. The auction house doors opened to reveal a gray Montana sky, heavy with the promise of rain. Rachel led her new ranch hands toward her truck, hoping she had made the right decision. Marcus Thompson had been a proud man once. Before the accident, before losing his job, before having to stand on an auction block with his children and hope that someone decent would buy their contract. The horse that had crushed his leg had taken more than just his mobility. It had taken his dignity, his security, and his faith in the people he had trusted. As he helped his boys into the back seat of Rachel's truck, Marcus tried to push down the shame that had been eating at him for months. Jake and Luke had been through enough without seeing their father break down. They had watched him struggle with the medical bills, the job loss, and the eviction notice. They had packed their few belongings without complaint when he told them they would have to leave the only home they had ever known. Rachel seemed different from the other bidders at the auction. She wasn't looking at them like property to be used and discarded. When she had outbid that creep in the cowboy hat, Marcus had felt a surge of relief so strong it almost brought him to his knees. He had seen the way that man was looking at his boys, and it had made his blood run cold. "Dad, she seems nice," Luke whispered as they settled into the truck. "Don't get your hopes up too high, son," Marcus replied quietly. "We don't know her yet. People can seem nice at first." But as Rachel climbed into the driver's seat and adjusted the rearview mirror to look at them, Marcus caught something in her expression that gave him pause. She looked as uncertain as he felt, as if she was wondering what she had gotten herself into. For some reason, that made him feel slightly better. "There's a diner about 20 minutes from here," Rachel said, starting the engine. "They make good burgers and pie. I figured we could all use a proper meal before we head to the ranch." Jake's stomach growled audibly and Rachel laughed. "I'll take that as a yes." As they drove through the Montana countryside, Marcus found himself studying Rachel in the rearview mirror. She was younger than he had first thought, probably in her late 20s. The wedding ring tan line on her finger told a story of recent changes in her life. Her pregnancy was obvious, but she carried herself with determination rather than fragility. "If you don't mind me asking," Marcus said carefully, "how long have you been running the ranch?" Rachel's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "About 3 months. My grandfather left it to me when he passed. I was living in Denver working as a teacher before." She trailed off, then seemed to gather herself. "Before my life took a different turn." The silence that followed was comfortable rather than awkward. They were all running from something, Marcus realized. All of them trying to figure out how to rebuild their lives after everything had fallen apart. The diner Rachel had mentioned was a classic roadside establishment with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that probably hadn't worked in 20 years. As they settled into a corner booth, Marcus watched his boys' faces light up at the sight of the menu. It had been weeks since they had eaten anywhere but truck stops and fast food places. "Order whatever you want," Rachel said, and Marcus started to protest about the expense. "Ma'am, we appreciate the kindness, but we can't expect you." "It's Rachel," she interrupted gently. "And you're not expecting anything I'm offering. There's a difference." The waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile, approached their table. "What can I get you folks?" Jake and Luke ordered cheeseburgers with fries, their voices polite but eager. Marcus asked for a coffee and a sandwich, still uncomfortable with accepting more than necessary. Rachel ordered a chicken salad and milk, her hand resting on her belly. "When's the baby due?" the waitress asked with genuine interest. "December," Rachel replied, smiling for the first time since Marcus had met her. "Right around Christmas." "That's wonderful, first one." Rachel nodded, and Marcus caught a flicker of something, uncertainty, maybe fear, cross her face. He understood that feeling. He had felt it when the twins were born, when their mother had died in childbirth, when he realized he was going to be raising two children on his own. After the waitress left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Marcus could see that his boys were trying to be on their best behavior, sitting straight and keeping their voices low. It broke his heart that they felt the need to perform, to prove their worth to yet another stranger. "How old are you boys?" Rachel asked, breaking the silence. "12," Jake answered. "We'll be 13 in October." "Both of you, on the same day?" Rachel's smile was genuine now, and Marcus felt some of his tension ease. "We're twins," Luke said with a grin. "Most people can't tell us apart, but Dad always can." "I can tell," Rachel said, studying their faces. "Jake's got a small scar on his chin, and Luke's left ear is slightly different. Plus, Jake's about half an inch taller." The boys exchanged impressed looks. Most adults couldn't be bothered to really look at them, to see them as individuals rather than a matched set. "How'd you know that?" Jake asked. "I was a teacher," Rachel explained. "You learn to pay attention to details. Plus, I taught a lot of twins over the years. They're always more different than people think." Marcus felt something shift inside him. Maybe, just maybe, they had found someone who would see them as people rather than just cheap labor. As the food arrived and conversation flowed more easily, he allowed himself to hope for the first time in months. The ranch appeared before them as they crested a hill, sprawling across the valley like something out of a Western movie. Rachel pulled the truck to a stop at the top of the rise, giving them all a moment to take in the view. The main house was a two-story log structure with a wide front porch and green metal roof. A large barn stood to the left, with several smaller outbuildings scattered around the property. Cattle dotted the pastures, and the mountains provided a dramatic backdrop in the distance. "It's beautiful," Luke breathed, his face pressed against the window. "It's bigger than I expected," Jake added, his voice filled with awe. Marcus had to admit he was impressed. The property was well maintained, with good fencing and what looked like quality cattle. This wasn't some run-down hobby ranch. It was a serious operation. "How many head of cattle?" he asked professionally. "About 300, Rachel replied. "My grandfather specialized in Black Angus. The herd has good bloodlines, but I'm still learning about the business side of things." As they drove down the gravel road toward the house, Marcus noted the details that would matter for their work. The pastures were well rotated, the water sources looked adequate, and the equipment he could see appeared to be in good condition. This was a ranch that had been run by someone who knew what they were doing. Rachel parked near the front porch and turned to face them. "I should probably explain the living arrangements. There's a bunkhouse behind the barn that's been empty for the past year. It has 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a bathroom. It's not fancy, but it's clean and comfortable. Marcus felt a wave of relief. He had been worried they would be expected to sleep in the barn or share a single room. That sounds perfect, Ma'am Rachel. The contract from the auction house says 3 months, Rachel continued. But I want to be clear about something. I'm not looking for indentured servants. I'm looking for partners. If we work well together, I'd like to discuss a more permanent arrangement with proper wages and benefits. Marcus stared at her, certain he had misheard. Partners. I inherited this place, but I don't know how to run it. You have 15 years of experience. My grandfather's foreman retired last year, and I've been struggling to manage everything on my own. Rachel's hand moved to her belly again. With the baby coming, I need people I can trust. People who will care about this place as much as I do. Jake and Luke were practically vibrating with excitement, but Marcus forced himself to remain cautious. What kind of permanent arrangement? Competitive wages, health insurance, housing, and a percentage of the profits, Rachel said without hesitation. Plus, I'd want to set up education accounts for the boys. They should be in school, not just working. Marcus felt his throat tighten. It had been so long since someone had spoken to him with respect, had seen his children as more than just extra hands. Rachel, we haven't even proven ourselves yet. You don't know if we're any good at this. I know you care about your boys. I know you're willing to work hard to provide for them. And I know you have experience I need. Rachel opened her truck door. The rest we can figure out together. As they climbed out of the truck, Marcus took a deep breath of the clean mountain air. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to imagine a future that didn't involve constant worry about where they would live or how they would eat. The boys were already walking toward the barn, their voices animated as they discussed the possibilities. "Can we see the horses?" Jake called back to them. "There are 6 of them," Rachel replied. "Though I should warn you, I'm not much of a rider. That's another skill I need to learn." Marcus smiled, feeling some of his old confidence return. "I can teach you. The boys are good riders too, when they have horses that aren't trying to kill them." As they walked toward the barn, Marcus noticed Rachel watching his limp with concern rather than pity. "The leg," she said quietly. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that I can't do everything I used to," Marcus admitted. "But I can still ride, still work. It just takes me a little longer and I need to be careful." "We all have limitations," Rachel said simply. "The important thing is working around them." Inside the barn, Marcus felt truly at home for the first time in months. The smell of hay and leather, the sound of horses moving in their stalls, the sight of well-maintained equipment, it all spoke to something deep in his soul. This was where he belonged, where he could be useful again. The boys were already introducing themselves to the horses, their natural ease with animals evident in every movement. Marcus watched them with pride, remembering when he had been their age, working alongside his own father on a ranch much like this one. "They're naturals," Rachel observed, standing beside him. "They've been around horses and cattle their whole lives," Marcus said. "Their mother was a ranch hand too before she died. She would have loved seeing them like this." Rachel glanced at him but didn't pry, for which he was grateful. Some stories were too painful to share with strangers, even kind ones. As they toured the rest of the property, Marcus found himself slipping into his old role as foreman, pointing out areas that needed attention, asking questions about feed schedules and veterinary care. Rachel listened attentively, taking notes on her phone and asking intelligent questions that showed she was serious about learning. By the time they reached the bunkhouse, Marcus was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had found their way home. The bunkhouse was better than Marcus had dared to hope. Each bedroom had a real bed with clean linens, a dresser, and a window with a view of the mountains. The kitchen was fully equipped with modern appliances, and the living room had comfortable furniture arranged around a stone fireplace. It was modest but clean and well-maintained. "This is incredible," Jake said, standing in the doorway of what would be his room. "We haven't had our own rooms in forever." Luke was already unpacking his few belongings, carefully placing a framed photo of their mother on the nightstand. Marcus felt his chest tighten as he watched his son handle the picture with such care. They had lost so much, but they had never lost each other. "I'll let you get settled in," Rachel said from the doorway. "Tomorrow we can start going over the ranch operations. For tonight, just rest." After she left, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed and allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. The boys were in their rooms, exploring their new space with the resilience of youth. For the first time in months, he wasn't worried about where they would sleep tomorrow night. His phone buzzed with a text message, and Marcus's stomach dropped when he saw the sender's name. Peterson. His former employer had been harassing him since the auction, demanding to know who had bought his contract and making threats about getting his boys back. "You can't hide forever, Thompson. I know people who know people. Your new boss won't want the trouble you'll bring." Marcus deleted the message without responding, but the fear remained. Peterson had connections in the ranching community, and he was vindictive enough to cause problems for Rachel if he discovered where they were. Marcus had hoped that leaving the area would be enough, but Peterson's reach was longer than he had anticipated. "Dad," Jake appeared in the doorway, concern evident on his young face. "Everything okay?" Marcus forced a smile and put his phone away. "Just tired, son. It's been a long day." "Do you think we'll get to stay here?" Luke asked, joining his brother in the doorway. "Really stay, I mean, not just for 3 months." "I hope so," Marcus said honestly. "But remember what I always tell you about hope. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst," the twins recited together. "That's right. We'll work hard, prove ourselves, and see what happens." As the boys went back to their unpacking, Marcus stood at his window and looked out at the ranch spread before him. The cattle were settling in for the night, and the mountains were painted purple by the setting sun. It was beautiful and peaceful, everything he had ever wanted for his children. But Peterson's message had reminded him that their troubles weren't over. The man who had bought their contract at the auction, the one in the cowboy hat, had been working for Peterson. Marcus had seen the recognition in Peterson's eyes when he spotted them at the auction, had seen the fury when Rachel outbid his representative. Peterson wanted the boys back, and Marcus knew it wasn't because he valued their work. The man had always looked at Jake and Luke with an intensity that made Marcus's skin crawl. He had never been able to prove anything, but his instincts as a father had screamed warnings every time Peterson was around his children. Marcus pulled out his phone and composed a careful message to Rachel. "There's something I need to tell you about my former employer. Can we talk tomorrow?" He stared at the message for a long moment before hitting send. Rachel deserved to know what she might be getting into by helping them. If Peterson came calling, she needed to be prepared. The response came back quickly. "Of course, first thing in the morning, get some rest." Marcus smiled despite his worries. Rachel was proving to be everything Peterson wasn't: decent, fair, and genuinely concerned about the welfare of others. If they had to fight to stay here, at least they wouldn't be fighting alone. As he drifted off to sleep in a real bed for the first time in weeks, Marcus allowed himself to dream of a future where his boys could grow up safe and secure, where they could learn to be men without fear, where they could have the childhood he had always wanted to give them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were home. Rachel stood on her front porch the next morning, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. Her coffee had gone cold in her hands as she processed the conversation she'd had with Marcus an hour earlier. His former employer, David Peterson, wasn't just a bad boss. He was a dangerous man with a history of exploiting workers, and according to Marcus, an unhealthy interest in young boys. The revelation had sent ice through Rachel's veins. As a former teacher, she had been trained to recognize the signs of predatory behavior. Marcus's carefully worded explanation had painted a picture of a man who had used his position of power to isolate and control vulnerable families. The fact that Peterson had sent someone to the auction to buy the Thompson family's contract made perfect sense now. "He's not going to give up easily," Marcus had warned her. Peterson has connections throughout the ranching community. He'll try to cause problems for you, make it expensive to keep us here." Rachel had listened carefully, asking questions about Peterson's methods, his associates, and his resources. What she learned made her angry rather than afraid. She had dealt with bullies before, both as a teacher and during her divorce. The key was not to show weakness and to document everything. "Let him come," she had told Marcus. "I'm not afraid of David Peterson." Now, as she watched Marcus emerge from the bunkhouse with his boys, Rachel felt a surge of protectiveness that surprised her with its intensity. In just 24 hours, these three people had become important to her. She wasn't about to let anyone hurt them. "Morning, Rachel," Marcus called out as they approached the house. "Ready for that tour of the operation?" "Absolutely. But first, I have something to show you." Rachel led them into the house, to the office her grandfather had used to manage the ranch. The walls were covered with certificates, awards, and photographs documenting 50 years of successful ranching. "Your grandfather was Robert Martinez," Marcus said, recognition dawning in his voice. "I heard of him. He was legendary in these parts." "He was," Rachel said proudly. "He also kept meticulous records." She pulled out a thick folder, including documentation of every interaction he had with David Peterson over the years. Marcus's eyes widened as he scanned the papers. "Peterson tried to buy cattle from your grandfather." "Multiple times. And every time Grandpa turned him down. According to these notes, Peterson runs his operation by cutting corners on animal welfare, worker safety, and environmental protection." Rachel pointed to a particular document. Grandpa also suspected Peterson of falsifying breeding records and selling inferior livestock at premium prices. "That would explain why he was so interested in your grandfather's herd," Marcus said thoughtfully. "Peterson's been trying to improve his reputation by associating with respected ranchers." Jake and Luke had been listening quietly, but now Jake spoke up. "Is that why he was so mean to us? Because we worked for someone he didn't like?" "Partly," Marcus said carefully, "but mostly because he's not a good person, son." Rachel made a decision that would change all their lives. "Marcus, I want to offer you a permanent position as my ranch foreman. Not in 3 months, but starting today. Full salary, benefits, and a contract that gives you legal protection against harassment." Marcus stared at her. "Rachel, you barely know us." "I know enough. I know you care about your boys more than anything. I know you have the experience I need. And I know you're standing up to someone who deserves to be stood up to." Rachel pulled out a legal document she had prepared earlier. "I also know that Peterson will think twice about harassing an employee who has a formal contract and legal representation." As Marcus read through the contract, his hands began to shake. The salary was more than he had ever earned. The benefits were comprehensive, and the legal protections were extensive. Most importantly, there were specific clauses about housing and education for his children. "There's more," Rachel said. "I've been thinking about what you said about the boys needing to be in school. The local school district is excellent, and they have a program for ranch kids that allows flexible scheduling during busy seasons." Luke grabbed his brother's arm. "Real school with other kids." "With other kids," Rachel confirmed. "And if anyone gives you trouble because of your situation, they'll have to answer to me." Marcus looked up from the contract, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Why are you doing this? You could hire experienced ranch hands without all the complications we bring." "Because complications are just challenges waiting to be solved," Rachel said simply. "And because I believe in standing up for what's right." Peterson sounds like the kind of man who's used to getting his way through intimidation. It's time someone showed him that doesn't work anymore. As Marcus signed the contract, Rachel felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was what her grandfather would have wanted, the ranch being used to protect people rather than exploit them. She was continuing his legacy in a way she had never expected. "There's one more thing," Rachel said. "I want to install a security system. Cameras, alarms, the works. If Peterson comes around, I want evidence of everything he does." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Smart thinking. Peterson's smart enough to be careful, but he's also arrogant enough to slip up if he thinks he's not being watched." As they headed out to begin Marcus's first official day as foreman, Rachel felt a flutter of movement from the baby. She smiled, placing her hand on her belly. "You hear that, little one? We're going to make this place a safe home for everyone." The next few days fell into a comfortable routine. Marcus proved to be everything Rachel had hoped for in a foreman: knowledgeable, hardworking, and genuinely invested in the welfare of both the animals and the land. Jake and Luke threw themselves into their work with enthusiasm, learning quickly and never complaining about the early mornings or physical demands. More importantly, they began to feel like a family. Rachel found herself looking forward to the evening conversations on the porch, when Marcus would share stories about ranching, and the boys would pepper her with questions about teaching and city life. They helped her with tasks around the house, and she helped them with their correspondence courses until the new school year started. The security system was installed discreetly, with cameras positioned to cover all approaches to the ranch. Rachel had also retained a lawyer who specialized in employment law and harassment cases. She was taking no chances with Peterson. The first test came on a Thursday afternoon. Rachel was in the house working on ranch finances when the security system alerted her to a vehicle approaching. She looked at the monitor and felt her blood run cold. A black truck with tinted windows was parked at the front gate, and a man in a cowboy hat was walking toward the house. Rachel activated the recording system and grabbed her phone, sending a quick text to Marcus. "Peterson's here. Stay with the boys." She met Peterson at the front steps, making sure to stay within view of the cameras. Up close, he was even more unpleasant than she had expected, a large man with cold eyes and a cruel smile. Everything about him screamed predator. "Ms. Martinez," Peterson said, tipping his hat in mock politeness. "I'm David Peterson. I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I don't believe I do," Rachel replied calmly. "Is there something specific you need?" "I think you know what I need. Marcus Thompson and his boys. They're under contract to me and I want them back." Rachel pulled out her phone and showed Peterson the signed contract. "Actually, Mr. Peterson, they're under contract to me now. A legal, binding employment agreement that supersedes any previous arrangements." Peterson's face darkened. "You have no idea what you're getting into, lady. Thompson brings trouble wherever he goes. His boys are uncontrollable and he's unreliable. I'm doing you a favor by taking them off your hands." "That's interesting," Rachel said, "because my experience has been exactly the opposite. Marcus is an excellent foreman, and his boys are polite, hardworking, and well-behaved. Perhaps the problem wasn't with them." Peterson stepped closer, trying to intimidate her with his size. "You're making a mistake. I have connections in this community. I can make things very difficult for you." "Mr. Peterson," Rachel said firmly, "you're trespassing on my property. I'm going to ask you to leave now. If you have any legal issues with my employment of the Thompson family, I suggest you contact my lawyer." She handed him a business card, and Peterson's expression grew even uglier when he read the name. Rachel's lawyer had a reputation for taking on powerful men who thought they were above the law. "This isn't over," Peterson snarled as he walked back toward his truck. "You'll regret interfering in my business." "I'm sure I will," Rachel called after him. "Have a nice day." After Peterson left, Rachel sat on her porch steps and let herself shake. She had stood up to bullies before, but never one with Peterson's reputation for violence. The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously, as if reminding her of what she had to protect. Marcus appeared around the corner of the house, moving as quickly as his injured leg would allow. "Are you okay? We saw him leave." "I'm fine," Rachel said, though her voice was unsteady. "He made threats, but nothing actionable. The cameras got everything." "He'll be back," Marcus said grimly. "Peterson doesn't give up easily." "Let him come," Rachel said, standing up and brushing off her jeans. "I'm not afraid of him." But as she watched Peterson's truck disappear down the road, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Peterson had looked at her with the same cold calculation she had seen in the eyes of other predators, men who saw other people as objects to be used and discarded. That night, Rachel lay in bed thinking about the choice she had made. She could have avoided all this trouble by simply finding different ranch hands, people without Peterson's baggage. But something about Marcus and his boys had called to her protective instincts. Maybe it was her pregnancy, or maybe it was the memory of her grandfather's values, but she knew she had made the right choice. The baby kicked again and Rachel smiled in the darkness. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered. "We're going to keep everyone safe." 2 weeks passed peacefully. Marcus settled into his role as foreman with the confidence of a man who had found his calling. He restructured the feeding schedules, implemented new safety protocols, and began planning for the fall roundup. The cattle were thriving under his care, and Rachel found herself learning more about ranching in 2 weeks than she had in the previous 3 months. Jake and Luke had transformed from quiet, cautious children into confident young men who took pride in their work. They helped with feeding, mended fences, and even assisted with basic veterinary care. Rachel watched them grow more secure each day, their laughter becoming more frequent and their smiles more genuine. The boys had also become protective of Rachel, especially as her pregnancy progressed. They would appear at her side whenever she tried to lift anything heavy, and Luke had appointed himself her official escort whenever she went to check on the cattle. Their concern was touching and reminded Rachel of how much she was looking forward to having her own child. On a Saturday morning, Rachel was in the kitchen making breakfast when she heard vehicles approaching. Through the window, she could see a convoy of trucks and SUVs heading toward the house. Her heart rate spiked as she recognized Peterson's black truck in the lead. "Marcus," she called out, grabbing her phone to alert their lawyer and the sheriff's department. Marcus appeared at the kitchen door, took one look at the approaching vehicles, and immediately understood the situation. "Boys, get to the safe room," he called out. Rachel had installed a panic room in the basement, complete with communications equipment and supplies. "I'm not hiding," Jake protested, but Marcus cut him off. "This isn't about hiding. This is about being smart. Go now." As the boys reluctantly headed for the basement, Rachel and Marcus positioned themselves on the front porch. The security cameras were recording everything, and Rachel had managed to get through to both the sheriff's department and their lawyer before the convoy reached the house. Peterson climbed out of his truck, followed by 6 other men. Rachel recognized the man in the cowboy hat from the auction, but the others were strangers. They looked like the kind of men who were hired to intimidate rather than discuss. "Ms. Martinez," Peterson called out, his voice carrying false joviality. "I thought we might have another conversation about your employment situation." "Mr. Peterson," Rachel replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I believe I told you to contact my lawyer if you had any legal concerns. Sometimes it's better to handle things between neighbors," Peterson said, his men spreading out in a loose semicircle around the porch. "I'm prepared to offer you compensation for your trouble, a nice sum to cover your expenses, and you can find new help that won't bring you the kind of problems Thompson brings." Marcus stepped forward slightly. "Rachel, you don't have to listen to this." "Stay out of this, Thompson," Peterson snapped. "You've caused enough trouble." "Actually, he hasn't caused any trouble at all," Rachel said. "He's been an excellent employee. The only trouble has come from you, Mr. Peterson." Peterson's mask of civility slipped. "You have no idea what you're protecting. Thompson's boys aren't just ranch hands, they're damaged goods. They've been through things that would break most kids. You sure you want that kind of instability around your baby?" Rachel felt a surge of rage so intense it made her vision blur. "Are you threatening my child?" "I'm warning you," Peterson said. "Sometimes damaged kids act out. Sometimes they hurt people. It would be a shame if something happened to your baby because you insisted on keeping dangerous people around." The sound of approaching sirens cut through the morning air. Peterson's expression tightened as he realized the sheriff's department was responding to Rachel's call. "This conversation isn't over," Peterson said as his men began moving back toward their vehicles. "Yes, it is," Rachel said firmly. "And Mr. Peterson, if you ever threaten my child again or suggest that Jake and Luke are dangerous, you'll discover exactly how fierce a protective mother can be." Peterson's eyes glittered with malice.